There we go. All right, so many of you probably remember this case, 6 charged in connection with human trafficking and prostitution in New Hanover County. So this is right down the road from you guys. So many of you probably remember. Some of you might have even worked on this case, either through law enforcement or been a direct service provider and assisted the victims in this case. So I want to say thank you if you did. This case it stood out to me just merely because the number of victims, 150 victims that they identified within the 6 months that they were investigating. So here are the traffickers that were arrested. I know they look like anybody that you might see on the street. Look like anybody that might be sitting here today. And the headline read, Cape Fear escorts entertainers would recruit victims by promising them thousands of dollars for dancing, but would in turn have the victims engage in commercial sex and then took the proceeds from it. So, sleazeballs. All right, we'll come back to that. I'm opinionated. So my name is Niki Miller. I'm the executive director of SHIELD North Carolina, and we are an anti-trafficking organization located in Apex, which is right outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. And we combat human trafficking in a 3-pillar approach. We empower, which is part of what we're doing today by training, giving you guys the information and hopefully empowering you to act. We also do outreach and then advocacy, so empowerment, and then advocacy, which means we educate and advocate for smart, effective policies and legislation, both on the municipal, the state, and the federal levels. And then we also have a prevention pillar. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. As part of that prevention, we co-founded the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force. So that's a lot of words that most people don't know what means. Demand reduction. What is demand reduction? What even is demand? So I'll start, and the easiest way to think about this is that traffickers think of human trafficking as a business. There's money in it for them. There's a business. It's a business. There's supply and demand. Unfortunately, that supply is the services of victims. And then on the demand side, the trafficker is not creating the demand. The trafficker is facilitating the transaction. They're the third party. Who is creating the demand is those people willing to purchase, putting the money into that market. They're creating the demand. So let's look back at this case in Wilmington. All right, how did it pop up? Okay. I thought I had the magic buttons, I was so proud of myself where it popped up a little bit at a time, but here it is all together, so we'll go through it. So when I heard about this case, like I said, I was impressed. I was grateful for the people that worked on this case because I know a lot of planning, a lot of collaboration has to go into a case like this. So I was grateful and I was thankful for those 150 victims that now had an opportunity at freedom. I prayed for them that they would find healing. But because of my years in demand reduction, doing demand reduction work, I also thought, all right, there's 150 victims in 6 months. Let's say, on average, those victims are sold between 6 and 10 times a day. So 8 times a day, 150 victims, that's 1,200 felony offenses. Because yes, soliciting sex is a felony offense in North Carolina. So 1,200 felony offenses. Now I know that 75% of those offenses were done by buyers to purchase multiple times. So I'm going to spare you the math here. But so 75%, like I said, spare you the math, boils down to about 375, give or take, felons, accomplices that are still out there in Wilmington. And that's just for this case, just for those 6 months. So how do we reduce that number? Because we know if there are no buyers, right, then there's no victimization. There's no need to supply a product, which is what they think of it, how the traffickers think of it. There's no need to apply. There's no need to recruit. There's no need to groom if there's no buyers. So how do we reduce that number? Effectively, we would like to eliminate it, but at least let's get it down. And so that's what the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force is looking at. And we have people from all across the state, stakeholders from all across the state looking at that. Make sure I told you everything I was supposed to. Yes, I believe so. All right. So the mission of the task force is to create and execute a comprehensive plan to reduce the demand for services of exploited people in North Carolina. And our goal is to launch those effective demand reduction programs and to address both labor and sex trafficking. So what we did, how we started, was we looked, okay, what are other states doing? What are the approaches that are being used? Are they effective? And we'll look at some of that in the breakout section. And then we'll also look at who are the buyers? Because in order to change behavior, you have to understand who it is that's doing that behavior, right? So there's a couple of studies that we'll talk about in the breakout session. And then also one thing that the Demand Reduction Task Force did is we educated legislators. And we said, look, we've been told, I won't say who told us, someone high up on the statewide level told us it's just not a priority. It's a misdemeanor, and I think Pam mentioned it last night. So if it's a misdemeanor, we go out, we do all this work, we get a sting, and we end up with a handful of misdemeanor cases. Are they going to be prosecuted? Are they going to be dismissed? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. We're short-staffed. It's not a priority. It's not that it wasn't important. It just wasn't a priority. So we talked to legislators, and Representative Kevin Crutchfield last year presented a bill that would make soliciting sex a felony in North Carolina, and that went into effect December 1st. So we are the second state in the country to do that. Thank you. Yes, we are very excited. We are the second state in the country to do that. And of course, we would also penalizing the buyers isn't the end goal. The end goal is to change in behavior. So we don't want to penalize them and further isolate them. So what we're working on now is, and I guess it's okay to say this, what we're working on now is a buyer education program. So what we'd like for the judges to do, and in the law, there is that stipulation that the judges can mandate that the buyer go through a buyer education program if it's available. And we would like to give them treatment if they're more deviant buyers, if they're buying, 12 times in a 6-month period, then they might need some treatment, mental health treatment. Or maybe they just need education. Maybe they don't understand what they're doing. They understand it's not a victimless crime. It's not, a rite of passage. It's not you getting your needs met and, giving her a couple bucks. It's not that. And maybe they just need the education to know that, to change their behavior. So that is one of the goals. What you'll hear in the breakout section is, who the buyers are, what are the approaches, and where we're going. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the breakout session as well. So I hope you'll come.